All right, let's continue. So I'm going to take all this code, put it on my clipboard for a minute. I'm going to write some code using a helper method. Okay. Now the nice thing about helper methods is you can use them before you write them, right? I can pretend. So I could say something like, if is biggest of 4 or something like that, dogs I, then I can do something. And so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say public static boolean is biggest of 4. So boolean is just something that returns a true or a false. And I'm going to give it an array of dogs and an integer. And I'm going to write a comment here explaining what this function does. Returns true if dogs I is larger than its 4 neighbors. Okay. Now if I do this, then I can finish this function up here, right? And I could do something like, let's try and write this part of the code. So I need to have my return dogs. So that's going to be an array of dogs. New dog dogs.length. Okay, so it's a new array. I'm going to have a counter variable. There are nicer ways to do this, but we don't have the syntax for it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return dogs, count equals dogs I, count equals count plus 1. So that'll build us a running tally of our dogs, and then we'll return dogs. Okay. There's a tiny bug here, but I'm not going to fix it right now. Okay. So this code is pretty narrative, right? I read it. Okay, I got my return dogs. Okay, we go through I equals 0, I is less than dogs.length. If is biggest of 4, then let's add the dog to this new array and return it. It reads beautifully. And now, is biggest of 4, we're constrained, right? We don't have to think about everything. We don't have to think about returning anything that's, like an array of dogs. We just have to give a yes or no answer. Okay? So let's do for int j equals -2. J is less than or equal to 2. J plus equals 1. Okay? And now I need to, I'm going to use that same idea. I'm going to say is biggest. We'll assume true by default. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some dogs. Now before, in the earlier example, I had these if statements and so forth. But I'm actually going to give you another example of a helper function that you can use. So what I'm going to do, let's see, how do I want to write this? I want to write this as, maybe I'll do, I don't know, it's just one idea. Valid index or something. All right. So my valid index function, I give it my array of dogs, I give it an index, and I just say if I is less than 0, return false. If I is greater than dogs.length or greater than equal to dogs.length, return false. Otherwise, return true. Now, there's a shorter way to write this, by the way. You can just write this as I less than 0 or I is greater than or equal to dogs.length. Or I should say greater than or equal to 0. Right? Just showing this for those of you who want to write it more compactly, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it this way for readability. Okay, so now what I'll do is I will say if valid index dogs I plus j, then I'll do a comparison. Okay, so if dogs I plus j, actually no, I'm gonna do it right here, int compare, how about that, I plus j. I'm just making my code more narrative by giving this a name. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's not. But if dogs.compare index weight in pounds is greater than or equal to dogs dot dogs I weight in pounds, then I'm going to say is biggest equals false. Okay. Then at the end I'll return is biggest. Now, it may not be obvious, it's kind of hard bug to spot, but we still have the issue that if we compare ourselves to ourself, then this is going to end up being false, so no dog will ever be the largest. So I need something else, which is, I guess if j equals 0, then continue. There are other things you can do. Maybe that's not the most beautiful solution, but it at least reads simply. So avoid comparing ourself to ourself. Now, one of the things about programming is when you're in a big space like this, there are more beautiful solutions and less beautiful solutions. This is not the most beautiful solution. Having this is a little ugly to me, but it's not so bad, okay? And so when I did this practice, like, I don't know, yesterday or something like that, I didn't have this case. I had a more beautiful structure. And so something I could do is try and figure out how to make it more beautiful, but maybe not. All right. So now we, the is biggest of 4 function is a little more complicated, and maybe you can make it even more beautiful with the right helper functions. But the point is, all of that complexity is here, right? It's in this function. And so when I call is biggest of 4, it makes this code more narrative, right? It has a very clear, distinct meaning. And so on project 0, at least my solution had a couple of very important helper functions that made life much, much easier. Okay, I won't spoil them. It's part of the strategy. It's part of the challenge for you is to figure out what the helper methods should be. But I really want you to use them on project 0. Let's try running it and see if it works. I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So when I run this, I get 20, 22. All right, good. So I'm very close. That's the answer I'm supposed to get. But I'm getting this error. Now I'm going to actually do a preview of what you'll be doing in lab 2, which is to use the debugger, just to showcase this because I think it's so cool. So to get a sense of what's going on, I'm going to click this debugger and I set up a breakpoint, which will cause the code to pause. And so if I click this Java Visualizer button and I click Step Over, it's a little bit of a mess, but what we can see is that this right here, big dog's 1 variable, and this is a little beyond the scope of the class so far, but the problem is it has a bunch of null entries, and it's supposed to only have these 2 here. Okay, so this is maybe a little much for our class since I haven't really taught you those things yet, but the problem is just that we have all these nulls. So there's a little bit of a concern that we'll have to solve in some way where we need to get rid of all those nulls at the end, and so I will just do another, a quick fix. But the real tools to make this solvable cleanly are going to be in a future lecture. I guess I'll write a helper function, why not? Okay, how about this? Public dog array with no nulls. No, I don't want to do that. I think, actually, okay, array with no nulls. Okay, so I'm going to give it an array of dogs, and then I have count. So that's the number of, count is the number of non-null items. Okay, so what does this function do? Well, I have a variable called no null dogs equals new dog count. Then I'll say for int I equals 0, I is less than count, I plus equals 1, no null dogs, I equals dogs I, and then I'm going to return no null dogs. Okay, so here I need to do, let's say return dogs equals array with no nulls, dogs count, right? And so once I've done this, public static. Once I do this, return dog should no longer have those nulls in it. So if I run the code now, I end up with 1015. Uh-oh. Oh, I did the wrong variable. Okay, so I passed in the wrong input variable. Now I spotted this immediately, and what's nice is that because I have it broken down into functions, I can just immediately go, oh, oops, I have some silly little error. I should have said return dogs. Okay. So now when I look at this, I have 20, 22. Everything's working fine now. Okay. Now, if I had had all of that in one big function, like all of these lines of code in one function, and I ran into a bug, it is much harder to diagnose than if I had it broken down into little pieces. So this code is many things. It is 1, more narratively clear. It is 2, easier to get right when you write it. And 3, it is easier to debug if you're actually run into trouble. Okay, so please use helper methods when you're working on project 0. All right, that's it for today. I hope you found, I should note, this was a pretty challenging problem. So I don't expect you to watch this and just been like, yes, obviously, over and over. But I hope the power of helper methods was clear because you're going to be doing a harder task than LargerThanFourNeighbors on this project. And you really got to find the right helper methods to do it right, in my opinion. All right, that's it. See you next time.